Welcome to episode 419 of the Barcelona podcast, brought to you by the Blue Wire Podcast Network. I'm Jim Hilton, and he is, drum roll please, well, no, he's Francesc Tomas. We'll get into that, where you've been the last few weeks in a second, but how's everything going wherever you are now?
Things are going great. Thank you for asking, Dan, and obviously good to hear and see that the podcast continues to go strong. Things have been good. Been attending many World Cup matches. Then I went to Disney World. I'm currently in Wales, therefore sporting this stop. And yeah, things are good.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, with Wales playing the U.S. a little bit ago, I wouldn't have wanted to see that jersey a few weeks, but, we got the 1-1, so who cares about that? But as you mentioned, yeah, all right, we'll get into the beef of it because, Francesc, so for those who didn't know, you happen to have your permanent residence in Qatar, Doha to be
Yeah,
specific, and you happen to go to a bunch of games. So
yeah.
first and foremost, I think we'll go through the list here. Which games, if you can try to rattle them off, which games did you see so we know which ones exactly to be bothering you about?
Okay, so the one you mentioned, I was there in the stadium.
Mm-hmm.
The 1-1 against the US. I watched the first England game in which they scored, I think it was 6-2, if I don't remember correctly. Then the first Spain game, pretty much the only good one that Spain played, the 7-0 win. Second one with Wales, I was there too, I think it was with Iran. Then I watched Denmark and someone that was really loud, Tunisia.
Mm-hmm.
Another Iran game, that was the second Welsh game as well. And I think that was it. There was another one, but I honestly can't remember now. They
Yeah,
were all, it was all a blur. It all happened really quickly because I was only in Doha for the first week of the World Cup. So I had one or two matches on any given day,
mhm.
and it was quite intense. It was lovely, but it was intense.
Well, yeah. Context here. Your wife is from Wales. That's why you're in Wales right now, and so that's why
Yeah, yeah, of course.
the
Yeah,
jersey
yeah,
makes a little bit of sense. No
yeah,
worries,
yeah, yeah.
no worries, no worries. So I think with all those matches that you saw, now, unfortunately for you, yeah, it was very much repeat teams, right? So unless you're finding somebody from Wales or somebody from Iran, who stood out to you watching them live? Maybe. I mean, you could even, I guess, start with the Spain match, but anybody who stood out to you live.
Honestly, the team that stood out was Spain. I did not expect 7 goals to come on that match. Obviously, we now know what happened after, which wasn't amazing, to be honest. But being there on that match, it was an Al Thumama stadium, stadium that obviously means a lot to the Qatari culture because of the way that it's set up, because of the way that it's been built over the last 5-10 years. And it was the best of what Qatar had to offer in that respect. And the game itself, I mean, I was watching Spain in the World Cup for the first time ever for me, which actually meant a lot. But the goals just kept coming. So many different goal scorers, and to me, that was the team that really stood out. Gavi, Pedri, and even Jordi Alba, to be honest, were amazing on that game. And it was good to see so many Barca players doing well. But I thought Asensio was spectacular in playing the false nine and dropping to the sides. I thought Ferran had a good game as well. So watching them live, honestly, I thought Spain could have gone all the way and won the whole World Cup, but they seemed to stall later on. As for the loudest crowd, I think Tunisia was insane. It was in Education City Stadium. I actually work next to Education City, so to me it was like a home game for myself. It was literally 10 minutes away from where I normally work, and it was so loud because the stadium is designed in a way in which the sound bounces back down, and there were so many Tunisians in the country. Obviously, lots of residents are from Tunis, and the sound was, to be honest, a bit scary at times because they were so passionate. But it was an atmosphere that I've been to many bars in Madrid, and I think it compared. So I wasn't there in week 2 or week 3, but when Morocco played that semi-final, that must have been very similar. But I did think that Tunisia's crowd really stood out.
Yeah, I mean, I think the attendance numbers from this World Cup, I think, are a bit, you know, helter skelter with what you can find, what's true and what's not. But as you made mention too, that match that you saw, that Denmark Tunisia match, I remember watching it at home. It was pretty. I mean, it was pretty boring. Like the match itself, like being played
Yeah,
sitting on my couch, like it's not a great match. And I think, as you mentioned, like the one thing we do forget in those kind of atmospheres is that, especially where the World Cup is located now this year, that Tunisia, Morocco had such an advantage with just the
Yeah,
sheer number of fans that they had. So, I'm not defending the way that Spain played, right? I'm not defending the way that Portugal played against Morocco. I'm not defending the fact that they won their group. I'm not defending the fact that France got upset by Tunisia. But speaking of those results, having been there at the stadium, right, that Tunisia, there was a way for them to get a draw against Denmark and to beat and to upset France in that way. And there's a way that
yeah.
Morocco could win their group and to be as dominant as they were in the quarterfinals and the round of what was it? Yeah, the first round against Spain in the knockout. So speaking of Spain, though, that was the last time. So I guess consider yourself privileged because that was the last time we'll see Sergio Busquets with the national team because he
Yeah.
announced his retirement today from international football. Do you
Mhm.
think that it was time? Do you think it was that moment for Sergio Busquets to walk away?
It was. It was. I think that he's given a lot for many, many years. He's a European champion. He's a world champion, and he's the player with the third amount of caps in Spain's history. Obviously, we're not going to come here and discover what Busquets can do. He is a generational player that has dictated the way that not just Spain but also Barca have played for many, many years. So I honestly don't think he's got more than 6, 7 months left at Barca because it is quite clear that his mind is beginning to be elsewhere. He's someone that, especially in his 3, 4 first seasons, seemed to be like an octopus. He used to get into every role. The style of football has changed over the last 10, 15 years, and it is clear that the speed that he's lacking and not covering as much ground is affecting him. For the national team, if you want Spain to be able to compete with your Argentina, France, and the different teams that have made it far in the World Cup this time round, and obviously going forward 2 and even 4 years, I think it's quite clear that we need someone more speedy in there. In terms of quality, he could play until he's 90, but I think that football has changed, and it was time for Busquets to put that Roja away a little.
It's always interesting after every World Cup cycle when these legends choose to retire. Like for me, I said Luka Modric. I mean, he might have already retired from international football by the time we hear this, but because of his importance to Croatia and the number of players that can do what he can do in that national team, I can. He's one of those guys where even though he's 36, again, age basically from 33 to like 38 in world football, it's kind of like a case to case basis, right? Like how much do they
Yeah,
have left in the tank and things like that. Now we know that for Ronaldo, his age is his limit. Like he should have probably already taken that step back. I mean, he could have been invited, but he wouldn't have been a. I mean, he wasn't a primary figure. But for Modric, because of his importance to Croatia, I could see the federation even asking him to stick around through the Euros, right? But I
yeah,
think we know this is his last World Cup. And then we'll see. I mean, even no matter what happens, whether he wins the World Cup or not, like Messi is going to be a question mark afterwards. And then even the likes of Olivier Giroud is interesting because Giroud, very much like Busquets for France, can kind of do that job for a while still. Like he is still, I mean, he's in his mid-30s and he was supposed to be the backup to Benzema. But
hmm
Benzema, even though he could be healthy now, he was sent home, and Giroud was getting to do his thing, and he's a starter. And he's old enough to do again that job, to be the guy,
yeah,
just the reference point up top. So for Giroud, with the amount of talent that France have, though, I could expect that he's going to retire potentially from international football after this one, even though it looks like he still has plenty left in the tank. Yeah. So the next thing to speak about, I think now, Francesc, I didn't warn you for this, and as people know, you kind of like running. So I don't
all
expect
good.
I don't expect you to have answers to this, but I'm going to do mine first, so that if you do have a team of the tournament in the chamber, you come up with a few names that I missed, then I would love to
Hmm.
do that. You can add it, and we can work together through it. But so I do have my 11 right now, my team in the tournament. The final is not going to change that because I have some Argentina players and some French players in here already. And again, one match after the other six are not going to change it. So my goalkeeper of the tournament, I think Szczesny deserves a little bit of an honorable mention here. A shout out the Polish goalkeeper. But I think the goalkeeper of the tournament was the Croatian goalkeeper in Dominik Livakovic, whether it was the PKs, again, getting Croatia defensively all the way to the final the way he did. So that's my goalkeeper of the tournament. And then my back line is Teo Hernandez, the left back from France, Gavardiol, the Croatian
Yeah.
center back. I know he got messied, but we've all been messied. Everybody's Harry Maguire, actually from England, was the other center back. I can't believe I'm saying Harry Maguire in a team of the tournament, the World Cup, but here we are.
Yeah, no, no.
And then the right back is obviously Hakimi, Morocco's right back.
Yeah,
It has to be Hakimi. You have to reward again Morocco. So as far as the defenders and things like that, I'll give you a second to think about that because my midfield here is Amrabat is the defensive midfielder of the tournament. Morocco. I'm not saying that he deserves to be playing at a top 6 club in the UK or Real Madrid or Barcelona or Bayern Munich, but I am saying that Amrabat was the best midfielder over the course of a month. That's what he was. And when I say midfielder, I mean defensive midfielder in particular. And then that second midfield spot, or that first interior midfield spot, really, really difficult here because I think Jude Bellingham was good for England. And for those who listened to the second show last week, I disagreed with Levon quite a bit, and I'll disagree again. If the Netherlands had beaten Argentina, which they were very, very close to doing,
Yeah.
then I think it had to be Frankie de Jong. I think Frankie de Jong was maybe the Netherlands' best player, so Frankie de Jong was an option. They won their group, I'll remind you, probably pretty emphatically, and that's why we didn't talk about it, because that final match day in that group wasn't a talking point because Netherlands dominated. And I've already given Croatia credit with Gvardiol and Livakovic. So I think for Luka Modric, I have to kind of, pass on him for that reason. I already, have 2 other Croatian players. And then I think the other option would be Ohani from Morocco. I think as an
Yes.
8, I think was definitely an option. But I already said Amrabat. And then I have to say, though, even though he stunk it up in the quarterfinals against Morocco, Bruno Fernandes from Portugal also deserves a shout. He was really good during that group stage. So I think between Ohani and Frankie de Jong, I think that's where I'm at there with that 1-2 combination, because my other midfield spot is already set in stone. I didn't say his name yet, so don't give his name away. But between Frankie de Jong and Ohani, who's your other midfielder of your interior for the tournament?
I would say that you've already mentioned him. I think Bellingham from England was insane. I watched him play live, which, to be honest, gives you a different perspective. I actually had a seat behind the keeper, so I had the view
Mm-hmm.
of the 1994 European Club Soccer video games, and the amount of space that he covered, the amount of duels that he won, the clarity that he gave the English team was crazy. We cannot forget that he's a really, really young player coming into a high pressure environment, which is playing for England. Obviously, I do realize it is a World Cup and playing for any country is difficult. But I think with England comes the expectation of you just have to win the World Cup or it's going to be considered a failure. And to come into the team and having that impact was insane. Out of everyone you've mentioned as well, I think it's very hard to disagree with anything. I just want to mention the importance that El Dibu Martinez has for Argentina. I think that obviously Messi is the captain, and that's clear for everyone that's listening to this podcast. But I think that Messi's backbone is El Dibu. If you think about it, every time that Messi scores a goal, he goes and hugs him. Every time he saves a penalty, there he is. And I think that relationship that they have, because we know from the many years that Messi was at Barca, and we were fortunate to have him at Barca, that he's someone who needs to be surrounded by the right people, which is one of the reasons why El Kun Agüero signed for Barca, which is one of the reasons why El Kun Agüero has gone again with Argentina this time round, even though not as a player, but as a let's give him a job behind the scenes. And I think that which is something like Pinto used to do at Barca as well, right?
Yep.
So I think that the relationship that Dibu has with Messi has helped Messi be the cheerful, boisterous, ambitious leader that he is on the pitch. Because I think that's one of the main difference between vintage Argentina Messi and Argentina now, the Messi Argentina now, because his personality seems to have changed, and I think that the environment that El Dibu is creating for him has really helped. But obviously, his contribution on the pitch, I think, is second to none in this World Cup.
Yeah, I agree with that. I would also say for Messi's, we'll say, quote unquote personality, I think it's been whatever, and this is the perfect captain. It's been whatever it's needed to be based on the match, right? Because we saw him bare his teeth, right, against the Netherlands, and then when it's time to play joyful football again against Croatia, he does it, right, and he goes out and he has some fun, and everything is jovial and bright. And he was going to be meeting my other midfielder in the final, because my other midfielder, I'm cheating a little bit here, but Antoine Griezmann is the attacking midfielder for France, and it's Griezmann.
Of course.
Griezmann has been arguably the player of the tournament. That is the other midfielder. There is no argument. It's got to be him. Now up top, I think we have 2 spots that are set in stone. Obviously, someone's going to win the Golden Boot probably, and that means they're going to win the World Cup too. So it's Kylian Mbappe or Messi. One's going to win the Golden Boot, and and that player is probably going to have won the World Cup. We'll probably see it go that way. And then for Mbappe, though, he also means on the left wing That means that Cody Gakpo of the Netherlands gets an honorable mention, not a shout. Marcus Rashford, who you saw again in person, he gets a
Yeah,
shout, honorable mention, doesn't get the spot. And then the other spot is one of three options, but I think because of the way Brazil crashed out and when they did crash out, Richarlison, because again, if you talk about the group stage, probably Richarlison, but
yeah,
I think you have to either pick Olivier Giroud or Julian Alvarez of Argentina. I think obviously
yeah.
because of the final, it's got to be one of those two. So I'll let you make that final choice here. Is it Alvarez or is it Giroud?
Well, I think that because of his youth and the impact that he's had in terms of being unexpected, you have to go with Julian Alvarez. I think that what that kid's doing is crazy. Obviously, we still got one more game to go. I'm gonna show my colors right now. I hope Argentina win the World Cup. I said that from the very beginning.
They were my
I
pick.
was obviously, I was obviously rooting for Spain, but Messi has given us, me personally, so much over the years that I really do hope that he retires with that trophy. And I think Julian Alvarez is doing something that Higuain throughout all of these years couldn't really do, which is take responsibility of him. The guy creates his own goals. I mean, the one he scored in the last game, I think it was a semi-final, in which he just ran the whole pitch and fell over a couple of people, but continued to go and then ended up scoring the goal. That is something that Messi has never really had, even when he made the World Cup finals with Argentina before. Is someone who can take responsibility and create their own goals, their own opportunities. Normally in Argentina, everything flows through Messi's boots, and if Messi has a great game, they've got a better chance of winning. If Messi doesn't have the best game of his life, Argentina will certainly not win that one. But I do think that's not the case right now. I think that he's surrounded by a very supportive and independent cast that don't over depend on him. And just for that, I would give it to Julian Alvarez. But obviously, what Giroud is doing at his age is exceptional as well. But you've already given the mention, so for me, it's Alvarez.
Yeah, I mean, I think for Messi too in Argentina, as sad as it would be to see Dembele and Koundé not get the World Cup and not come back as champions, so no Barcelona player would come back in theory as a World Cup champion. That said, Messi in Argentina, with Messi this being his last World Cup, you get the sense that this would be their last chance for quite some time. And because of the age of that France core, I mean, Koundé being able to stay healthy, a lot changed in 4 years, of course. There's always so much turnover. But with
Mm-hmm.
Koundé at 23, if he continues on this path, he'll be 27 for next World Cup. You'd think he'd be healthy. You'd think he'd do some winning for Barcelona in that time. Dembele also has at least another World Cup in him as well. He's 25, so he'll be 29 the next World Cup. So
Yeah,
for Dembele and Koundé, in theory, if they continue to play at that level, and France especially will be another favorite 4 years from now, right? Like, there's no way. Like, even if Mbappe got hurt for the World Cup, France would still have been one of the tournament favorites. Like, that France will get another opportunity. Don't you worry about them. But this is for Messi, and especially Messi. Yes, his final one, but even for Argentina, I think this cycle, like, there is no one you see in that pipeline. Yeah, they've got some young talented players, but like the youngest player they brought, the one teenager they brought was Thiago Almada, who,
yeah,
yeah, no disrespect for MLS, but he plays for Atlanta United, and he's an okay player, but it's not like he's one of the best players in MLS, right?
mm-hmm.
He's expected to be a good player in the future. But yeah, that's their teenager, and then again, they have some young players, of course, coming up for River Plate or for Boca Juniors, but it's nowhere near what Brazil's going to have talent wise, even coming through. It's not what France still has coming through. It's not what Germany is in theory going to have coming through. It's not what Spain, with Alberto Moreno or whoever, you know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like, these are all those countries can, again, I'm not saying Moreno will be at the next World Cup, but I'm saying they're going to hit on some of those players, right? Like, even this
yeah,
one, Yearly Pino is coming. I think I did see kind of report where Smoke There's Fire that apparently his mood, his attitude, which makes sense, that a young player that Luis Enrique hadn't really worked with, he didn't really think that his attitude was what it needed to be.
yeah,
And so if he was that player that Luis Enrique was talking about, that makes sense. So was this the only World Cup that Pino was going to be at? And he winds up never making an appearance. Who knows? That's what I mean. Like, Ansu Fati can bounce back. I mean, who knows that Lamine Yamal from Barcelona could
mm-hmm.
be at the next World Cup as the 19-year-old, right? As the teenager that gets the call the way that Pino did this time. So you don't know. But speaking of that final, I got a text yesterday from a bunch of different friends who asked me, what are the chances that Messi and Argentina have to upset Mbappe and France? And I told them that if it was a regular day, a regular game, whatever, I would say, well, how about this? If it was a quarterfinal or semifinal, I'd say not as likely. But because it is the World Cup final and because it is Lionel Messi, I think it is possible. And
Yeah,
I think the chances I give I give them like a 45% chance. France had a better team, but I give it 45% because I also in the semifinal, like Morocco had a chance against France that Croatia never had against Argentina. So
Yeah,
I'll throw it out there too.
yeah, and I also think that both Argentina and France are teams that can play both types of football, meaning that they can dominate the ball. I think obviously France are more incisive in that respect when they're in control, but I think that both teams are very comfortable when they don't have it. And I think that's the main reason why Spain is not in the final and didn't progress further, because Spain seemed to be really one faced. They could control the ball, but when they didn't have it, they really suffered. And I think that both teams are very comfortable. The defensive line of Argentina, even though it doesn't have that many sort of world class names in it, they get together well. They understand each other well, and their record over the last, I think it was 48 games, they've only lost one or two. So it is clear that Scaloni has found the little button to press. And then in France, the back line is insane. Basically, you've got Koundé, who is arguably the best defender in La Liga in the last 3 years. He's only found a place as a right back. So um, from that perspective, it's going to be a tight final. But again, whenever you got Messi in your team, you have to think that you've got a chance of winning. It is clear, because he said it himself, that is going to be his last game in the World Cup. The last great tournament, international tournament that Argentina played, they won it. And that was the thorn that Messi had in his back all of those years, and that he seems to have reached this Maradona god of Argentina level already.
Yep.
And winning the World Cup would be the icing on the cake. And I think that he's so close to him that, and obviously the fact that he won't ever have another chance, that he's going to put everything in that game. He has reached levels in terms, this is Messi, he has reached levels in terms of the ability to upset games and to find that extra gear in the World Cup that I haven't seen him do for the last 8-10 years. And I think when you've got Messi on fire, surrounded by a team that he trusts and obviously trusts him as well, that's not something you can underestimate. And France, they're a solid team. They have got very good players, world class players, I would say, in pretty much every position. But they've got, I understand today there was another two potential absences to the starting lineup. And some of them that have been recovered from this bug that's going around the France camp. So I think you put everything into the balance, and I could not guarantee that France is going to go away with it. And I honestly think the football gods are going to be supporting Messi on this one.
Yeah. So we also have to mention the head coach for Morocco, team of the tournament head coach. I gave it away. It is definitely, Walid Regragui. He deserves it. I mean, if it was Morocco, they're the ones. I mean, it's the first African side to make the semifinal.
Yeah.
So for the hope of an entire continent, he is the manager of the tournament. Okay.
Can I
So
say on that, Dan, as well? So it is the team of the continent for Africa, but it's also the Arabic speaking champion.
yeah.
Because with the World Cup being in Doha, obviously Arabic is the first language there. And all of the Middle Eastern countries, Saudi, Oman, Kuwait, Bahrain, obviously the Emirates, they had the whole of the African continent behind them, but also the Arabic speaking countries. So it really was that they became the epicenter of the Arab world. And having lived in Doha for 4.5 years now, I thought that was pretty special. And if it was to happen in any World Cup, I was happy that it happened in the one in Doha. But obviously, I'm not too happy that they beat Spain. But
Yeah.
that aside, we'll have to
Yeah.
put that behind.
All right, so we do have a little bit of time to talk about Barca because, as I keep saying throughout the break, I mean, people don't really come here for their World Cup stuff. I can
No?
say that number. I can see the numbers, unfortunately. So while it has been a rough month, I've taken it on the chin. I'm hoping that everybody returns when Barca returned as well, because again, you come here for the Barca stuff. So with Francesc Tomas in tow today, we do want to talk about the expectations for the rest of this season. Because the positive for Barcelona coming out of the World Cup, and this is the most positive thing, that even if no Barca player would have won the World Cup, it seems like they've generally stayed healthy, and it seems like they're doing all right. It seems like all of them are going to be with a week or two of rest, ready to go for the second half. And with the exception of Lewandowski missing the first 3 games, that I'll remind you, it seems again this team is again ready to have got some play in. They have not been off for too long, and they might be able to hit the ground running. So that is a positive. But yeah, what are your expectations between the Copa del Rey, between getting, well, really kicking off, and the Liga, which Barcelona, remember, are top of the table, as well
Yep.
as the Europa League, where they find themselves, again, with some pretty difficult competition in the Europa League, by the way.
Well, I do think that having no Barca players winning the World Cup, maybe there are two. Hopefully there aren't. But if we only have two World Cup winners in the squad, that's only going to add more hunger to the team, which is what I think we need. I'm not going to change my tune from what it has been throughout the season. I think we've got a more than a good enough squad to win the La Liga for sure. I think that the growth that Gavi, Pedri, Balde have experienced is something that we need to build on. I think that Frankie de Jong as well is, even though that obviously he had one foot in, one foot out throughout the whole of the summer, he's establishing himself as one of the leaders in the team. I think that Busquets last season needs to be needs to be built on, and he will want to leave with a win. And I think Dembele, as you've already mentioned, being healthy is important up front. I think Lewandowski still is one of the best strikers in world football. And I really don't see a reason why we shouldn't win the La Liga. Obviously, we crashed out of the Champions League. I'm sure you've spoken about it in the podcast before. A couple of refereeing decisions not going the right way. But then
Come on.
again, yeah, but then again, if you're gonna balance everything on the referee, then you haven't really looked at yourself well and hard enough. So we just need to accept that we're out, and I think that that's going to be an advantage because the players won't be as tired. And I think having the 5 substitutions is good, and it's proven good this year because the players can get more rotation, have more players involved. I never really rate La Copa very highly, but obviously it is a competition that we could win and could give enough of enough of opportunity and minutes to the players that are not normally regulars. But honestly, I don't see any reason why we shouldn't challenge for both competitions until the very end. And then if there's a team that's better, e.g. Madrid, then so be it. But the expectation needs to be fighting until the very last game for both competitions, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the quote unquote positive here when speaking about the Europa League, of course, is that the Europa League doesn't kick off again until the middle of February when it's that home and away with Manchester United, which is a team that
Yeah,
Barcelona, is another big powerhouse who find themselves in the Europa League, but it's a team that Barcelona should beat. And it's unfortunate, but the Spanish Supercopa is also kind of taking place in January. So we'll see. There's the opening fixture against Real Betis, but yeah, they start the break with Espanyol, Atletico Madrid, and with things kicking off in 2 weeks' time. I'll preview those matches a little bit more and have those conversations in the next 2 weeks. What else are we going to talk about? You did mention Busquets, and we did it last week, and we can do it again this week, especially with him now retiring from international duty. I don't know if him retiring from international duty is a statement that it could just be a statement about Spain, but it could be a statement about where he sees himself in his career as well.
yeah,
So as I said before, my oh my, what does Xavi and Barcelona do with Busquets? And as much as it seems like the decision is Busquets's, whether or not he wants to leave, it also seems like Barcelona's money situation is so bleak that it's shaping up to be bleak until 2024. And now Barcelona is saying, well, Boosie, you could leave, or maybe you could just return on a really low number for us so that, we can get through this really difficult year, which would be
yeah,
next season when you can't afford anybody. So again, I just want to change the narrative a little bit that, well, it is Busquets' decision whether or not he stays or goes. There is this world where the club would love it if he left because they could want to replace him. And there is now a world financially where the club physically cannot, not even replace his spot on the field, but replace his spot in the squad. So there is a world where next season Busi renews, but only starts 35% of games. Like, I just want to get people prepared for that. He is, even though it's harder, or it looks like it's harder to get him out of the club, there is a world where next year Frankie de Jong is starting as your defensive midfielder. I'm not going to call him a pivot, but defensive midfielder with Gavi and Pedri around him. And that trio, who we only saw start against Villarreal this year in a 4-0 win, there's a world where that trio starts 56% of games, or 60% of all games, or 65% of all games. And then again, you have Busquets rotating in, and you have whoever else rotating in as well. We'll see if Frank Kessier is still around and what that means for the future. But Yeah. And as far as Jules Koundé, another World Cup related question: would you play Jules Koundé at right back when he returns, or is it Araujo at right back, or do you trust Roberto or Bellerin in that spot? I mean, because now you in theory have four right backs, and you've got enough center backs.
It just depends who you're playing. I think that if you're going to play your Getafe, Leganés, Levante type of team, it doesn't quite matter which one of those three plays. The three of them should be able to influence the game enough from the wings and be effective defensively so that we can beat those sort of teams. If you're talking about playing Atletico Madrid and Man United and Real Madrid, then obviously it's making the choice. And for those high caliber games, I think Koundé to me is the starting right back in that position, and then you choose between the many centre backs we have to complete the middle. I would say Araujo and Eric Garcia for me are the preferred pairing in the middle, even though Christensen has been good too. And then Kunde has to go to the right side.
I think it should be Araujo and Christensen. To be honest, like I think Christensen, we saw him at the World Cup. He was Denmark's best player, and we've seen him this season for what Barcelona is trying to do. Like, and I think that's I don't know. It's funny because if Barcelona in this perfect world, it's always in practice much different than on paper. Because on paper, I think the Champions League winning center back combination is Araujo and Kunde. I think they're the ones with the highest ceiling. That's the duo that you look at and say, oh, that duo is good enough to win the Champions League. But Barcelona are fighting in the Liga, which isn't the deepest league anymore, and they're fighting in Europa League, and they're fighting in the Copa del Rey and Spanish Super Cup. So I think that all those competitions, I think Christensen and Araujo are a combination that win you that with Kunde at right back, if that makes any sense. Because I agree with you. Like against Adafe, like it's got to be Roberto. Bellerin, I'm so sorry. I don't know. I don't know where you belong. Maybe you belong playing for Adafe on the other side, like with his performances this year. To be honest, like it's been rough for Bellerin. But anyway, yes, Bellerin should be good enough to play against Adafe. Again, Roberto. But yeah, it is this weird thing where on paper, I think it should be Araujo and Kunde winning the Champions League. But again, when it comes to match in and match out, I think the best back four is Balde, Christensen, Araujo, Kunde, with Kunde and
Yeah,
Christensen's ball playing abilities surrounding Araujo, if anything, right? Because then, I mean, with Araujo, you not say you can't really have Bellerin, but Bellerin gets forward in the way that he does, and then that puts a lot of pressure, because I want to remind people when Araujo comes back that we know what he does well. He's Barcelona's best defender. He's one of the best defenders in the world. But other teams, and we've seen it in the World Cup too, as far as the way teams are playing. As you mentioned, the best teams of the World Cup are those who are able to play in multiple ways over multiple
yeah,
phases, right? And Morocco and Croatia, them getting to the final is no surprise, like because they weren't just defending for their lives. They were sitting in, they were absorbing pressure, and it was their ability to come out of their shell. And when they had to push forward, we saw against France that when Morocco did not have, they had to have more possession. They were kind of fine in that instance, and they put pressure under. They put France under pressure in that second half in particular. So
yeah,
for Barcelona, they're going to have other teams sitting back and saying, "Hey, Araujo, with your feet, beat us with your feet. Can you do it?" And we saw in the preseason against Real Madrid with Araujo at right back that they were able to do that. Like there are moments when he finds a way through. But I want to remind people that as far as Barcelona and the problems that we saw at the World Cup, or the styles of the World Cup, right? Xavi has to figure out a way to be able to play multiple phases and to push forward with that. And having Busquets in the middle of your field is going to continue to make that an issue. And having Araujo as with his inability, if you will, to break down the press or break lines with his passing, that's going to be a continued issue, right? And it is interesting too that the way that the match is played out with the World Cup. I always say this, that those styles kind of dictate world football. As silly as it is, it's the same thing with the transfer, right? Where the World Cup makes transfers get inflated, right, and it all goes crazy. And I think while coaches and clubs have gotten smart and wise to that, where I don't think this World Cup, especially because it's wintertime, I don't think you're going to see some crazy, he did great in the World Cup, therefore we got to get that player for 50 million. I don't think you're
yeah.
going to see that. But I think what you will see is, I think the styles of the World Cup, teams are really going to look at that and say, hey, is that what's successful in world football now? And, as you and I are both basketball fans, and basketball is the same way, if you win, if you're the champion, if the best teams are playing this way, that's the way that everybody plays. It's copycat. And same thing with the World Cup. The World Cup does dictate how did the best teams play, And while you can't replace those players, those individual players, you can try to emulate and simulate the way that they did it, right? And so
Yeah,
Morocco, what made them so successful is that they had elite wing backs, and they, while they played a bit through the center of the park, it was a lot of running and it was a lot of hard work. And your midfield didn't necessarily dictate play. Your midfield defended for their lives, worked hard, while your wings and your flanks built everything up, and then you basically had a forward that his job was to score goals in the series.
yeah,
Just be a big guy and do that. And it seemed like those teams in this World Cup, even France, like France are playing that way, if you will. And think about their midfield. And Rabiot has having this renaissance, but that's because Rabiot is just running around. That's what his job is. Giovanni is, he scored that goal, but his job is to run around and to reset play and to get that ball and to give it to the guys who make things happen. And it
yeah.
seems like that's the way that football is being played right now. And so Barcelona I think they have to find a way to continue to be themselves. Sure, they're going to have the lion's share possession in the Liga, but they have to figure out a way that's not just Dembele, because Dembele is the only one who's doing that. So without Dembele, with the exception of Dembele, how can you play in multiple phases like that?
Yeah, for sure. And then the other point that the World Cup has proven is what we already mentioned before, and we sort of already knew, is that it is crucial to have a deep squad. I think that if you got Christensen, Eric Garcia, Araujo, even Koundé playing as centre back, is having them all fresh mentally and physically to come in and do a job. I think that the importance of Ansu Fati should continue to develop in the second half of the season. He didn't start that many games before the break, and to be honest, all of these less control he minutes, I think it's about time that he stopped. It's also time for him to take that further step that we're all expecting him to take. I think Ferran has enjoyed some minutes, but I'm expecting him to become even more solid. I want to put an aside here as well, because I think that the fact that he's going out with Luis Enrique's daughter and the fact that he plays for Barca is adding a lot of pressure on him from the media. And I've seen so many attacks coming from Marca and us, the other Madrid-based newspapers, towards Ferran, blaming him for a lot of things that I don't think are that bad. I
I mean,
saw him play.
Even Kool-Aids, like Kool-Aids are, I mean, they're like some of the guests on this podcast too, that it's unfortunate, but the fact that Alvarez went to Man City for the number that he did, and Fernando Torres came for 55 million from Barca when they probably could have got somebody else cheaper who
Yeah.
was going to get the same numbers of goals and
Okay.
assists. I think
Yeah.
Kool-Aids, they're just totally out on Ferran Torres. Like, so I think you're right. The criticism is coming from outside of Barcelona, but I'm saying like criticism is also for Ferran Torres coming from inside Barcelona. Like that pressure is coming from like Kool-Aids themselves, like saying that,
Yeah.
hey, why was this guy so expensive? Why is he not better?
Yeah, but at the same time, he's a young player. He's a young player that needs to continue to develop, and we need to support him. I don't think that he's having a lot less than all of the other attacking options that we have. I do think that obviously he's not, especially with the Barca shirt, because with Spain he scores a lot more regularly. But especially with the Barca shirt, he doesn't seem to find the net that often. But he does a lot of opening of spaces, a lot of dark work, like Pedro, you remember Pedrito all of those years ago, used to do. And I do think that he's got room for improvement for sure. But I do think that some of the criticism is far too severe for what he's adding. Because if we're going to criticize like that, you should start criticizing Ansu as well. And I don't think neither of them would be as fair.
Yep, and when you say depth, we'll close it here. That Memphis Depay, he's the one of any player that's going to be leaving in January. It is Memphis, but as you mentioned, because of that depth, and as I said, Spanish Super Cup, and this is January, Spanish Super Cup, Copa del Rey, La Liga. I could see Barcelona holding on to him. I mean, there's also this world where they kind of figure out how far we went in those competitions. Like if they wind up playing both matches of the Spanish Super Cup, and again, Copa del Rey, they don't get upset. They're getting to they win their first. I think the first game's in January or something, or maybe the first two rounds are in January. So let's say that he winds up leaving, but he leaves on January 31st, having played 6 matches in January, right? Like there's a world where they're like, okay, we need him for this month because of all these competitions, and then they let him go for depth purposes, depending on how far they are. Like if they crash out of the Copa, that means February on they only have to worry about La Liga and Europa League, right? Which is like,
Yeah.
but in the same regard, it's like you don't know with Ansu's health being what it is, and look at this. I think this as crazy as it sounds, that 3 match ban from Lewandowski is going to go a long way. Like Memphis
Yeah.
can find a way back. Like I know there's still 5 forwards that without Lewandowski, but I think Memphis can find his way back, even in the lineup not a starter, but like coming off the bench and having a role the way he did in the preseason for now. Because again, he's healthy, he can play. So if Memphis doesn't play coming out of the break, I think you know what that means, like pretty quickly.
Yeah, and I think with Memphis as well, he came to us for free. So I think that the pressure that is on Ferran Torres is because of the 50 million euros that we paid for him. But if you think about it, say just look at this season, I don't think Memphis Depay has added that much. And to be honest, I think that
He's only played 3 matches.
well, that's what I'm saying.
He scored 1 goal in 3 matches, which means he scored more goals in X minutes than everyone else because he was
Yeah,
successful the 2 seconds he was on the field.
yeah, but at the same time, he was, let's just say, injured for the 2 months coming up to the World Cup, and then as soon as the World Cup starts, he's playing 90 minutes for Holland. So you
I
gotta
know
you gotta put everything in the balance.
sure. I mean, I again, that's one thing where it's true. We can put the quotes over it, but I also don't blame him. Like you don't blame a player for sitting out that month or two prior to the World Cup and playing in the World Cup when you're in your prime. I mean, I think I'm not saying you and I would do it, but I think you and I would do it too. I think
Well, I don't know, but I think that there are players being criticized that they, like for example, Ferran has shown to give Barca a lot more, even despite the risk of injury, than Memphis has given before. So I think we need to put everything in the balance and then evaluate like that.
Sure. Right. Because I mean, Memphis looked at himself and said, "I didn't want to be a Sadio Mane situation." Right. Like we can't forget what happens when you do play and you may not be 100% right before. Because Sadio Mane was coming into that match for Bayern Munich with a little bit of a knock, and then it all gets exasperated, and then
Yeah,
he misses it, and then Senegal. Certainly, Senegal could have been the team to get to the semifinal from Africa with Sadio Mane because they were technically good. I mean, they were a Sadio Mane away from getting to the knockout rounds. Oh no, they got to the knockout rounds. They got knocked out by England. But even
yeah,
against England, like Senegal, right? So they still got to the knockout round without Sadio Mane. So let's say
yeah.
they were a Sadio Mane up away from upsetting England. But anyway, so that is Francesc Tomas. We appreciate again for those who don't know your Barcelona podcast history, because now I'm realizing that our podcast is old enough to go to kindergarten now. Francesc, so the one that we created. So there's probably many people that don't remember that Francesc and I started this together. He's the one who started Barca Blog, and he's the Don, if you will, that made all this happen. So thanks so much, Francesc. Always a pleasure to see your face.
Okay, likewise, man. I'm really happy that the podcast continues to grow, continues to move forward.
Well,
Thank you.
it continues. Let's say that.
Yeah, and really pleased that different people are taking the mic on a weekly basis. So huge thank you to them, and I just all success for the future. Hopefully, I can come back at some time throughout the end of the season, and we can celebrate some titles together.
Yep, hopefully. I'm going to remind people too, speaking of growing and moving forward, we have moved forward though and started that Discord. So down in the show notes below, jump in the Discord, have those conversations. I'm a little bit of an old dummy who doesn't know how to use technology well, but my mods are helping me out, and I figured out a way to get people to able to talk in those text chats. So those channels are open now. We can start to have those conversations. Remember, though, there's also the Facebook group that still exists. Twitter, Instagram is where you can chat with me as well. Then the Patreon is how we continue to make these shows and how you can get those without the ads in there. So again, that's always the incentive for Patreon. And then on YouTube as well, there's some special content that I just always do for YouTube. And we had the match review for France, we had the match review for Argentina, and I will have a match review coming out after the final as well. And then, of course, the match reviews will take a week off, and then the match reviews, 5 headlines and stuff, coming right back when Barcelona begin again for 2023. But most importantly, though, thanks so much for listening to the show, and until next time, we'll talk to you soon, and Forza Barca.
Forza.